Do you remember when you were a kid and one of your favorite things was to go to an arcade? You'd spend your whole day in an arcade. You'd save up your allowance for so long just to take all those quarters and cram them into your favorite arcade game. I don't know how many times we would sit there and line up our quarters to play Street Fighter against each other, just to have that chance to beat the one kid who's been there for the entire day off his one quarter or whatever. And there was other times where one of my favorite memories was we got to like stay in an arcade all night long. Like somehow back in the day, our parents paid for us to get locked inside of an arcade and stay there all night long. Like it was so amazing. And back when these arcades were here, we didn't have necessarily a lot of home entertainment systems. There was a couple things starting to creep out, like Ataris and some Nintendos and stuff, but arcades were the place to be. As a matter of fact, I think I judged all the malls I ever went to based off of how big their arcades were. Like, I don't know about you, but that's pretty much was my guidelines. And yeah, I mean, that I was a guy, and there's a lot of other people who maybe weren't into arcades as much, but still, almost every kid would spend time in there. That was where we went when our parents were shopping and everything. And it's sad because for a while, arcades pretty much started to die off, and it's something that we didn't like, but lately we've been seeing a huge comeback, and we got a chance recently to go to like an early experience of Smitty's new game lab in Brunswick, Maine, and it sparked us really talking about arcades and what they're doing and how many of them are like coming back and how many of them are kind of still around.
Just like Shay said, I loved going to the arcade as a kid. We would spend sometimes entire weekends there, playing the classics like Pac-Man, Street Fighter. And then the arcades slowly started dying out, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that. They just don't look like we did when we were kids. However, there has recently seemed to be a resurgence of some of these, and a lot of the reason being, at least we believe, is that they're bringing in new specialized games, like we were lucky enough to go on a VR coaster ride for King Kong. It felt like you were right there in the moment. That was super fun. And now it seems like they've even taken some of the classic games like Pac-Man, Galaga, Connect 4, and they're taking these and they're kind of blowing them up into these super-sized games now. I remember going and playing Fruit Ninja on a touchscreen at a Dave & Buster's, a bunch of friends. Those are things that you don't ever forget, but they're definitely different than what they used to be.
Yeah, I agree. And as much as the arcade games, you still have some of the classic ones where, you play with your friends and they're, platformers or whatnot. So many of the arcades now are turning into more of like I don't want to kind of like gambling, but the ticket-based systems and stuff. But we still, like I said, really love the uniqueness. Like when we went to the Smitty's one, there were some unique things. There was not just Connect 4, but it was Connect 4 with basketball. So you got like you're shooting Connect 4 while you're playing basketball. So it's really neat to see like all these different varieties of cool games. I remember playing Pac-Man on that gigantic screen, and like who's gonna like forget that experience? I mean, I used to beg to play the little flat top arcade Pac-Mans that they had in the restaurants and bars and stuff back in the day, and like to play Pac-Man on like a 25-foot screen, it's just amazing. Like we're pretty lucky to have these things in this era. Hey guys, so in case you were wondering, it takes a lot to try to record a video. If you heard singing in the background, that's Chloe, just an entire floor below us, and she's singing, which is awesome. But at the same time, if you hear that in the background, then that's part of being a parent. But recently we got this chance to go to Smitty's, and Sam's going to tell you a little bit more about this great experience.
We were lucky enough. We have went to Smitty's a lot. No, not as an arcade. It started out as what I like to refer to as like a movie tavern. So it's a movie theater. You go in, but you actually order like your dinner, your lunch, appetizers, and you eat it right at your table as you're watching the movie. Well, recently, they decided to expand into what they're calling Smitty's Game Lab. So they've decided to open up an arcade attached to it, along with axe throwing. So we were able to go in for a couple of hours for free and test everything out, and it was a blast. It's not the largest arcade we've ever been to by any means, but it was still definitely worth it. So Smitty's does have some of the classic games like Skee Ball and some carnival-type games, but a lot of their games are newer, or a lot of them are also ticket-based. So, for example, most of them are the I'm sure you've seen them. You whack a button and you win 100 tickets, or so you think you're going to win 100 tickets and then you win 5. There's a lot of those there. Chloe really enjoys that. Us, not quite as much. We're there more for the experience of the actual game itself.
Well, they're always fun, but I think what it is you play all these games for forever, and then the prizes are always like slightly disappointing for the kids, let alone the fact that if you ever try to actually value them financially, I think that's where it's like, oh man, we just spent $40 for you to walk away with like a $3 stuffed animal. I guess that's rough, but I mean, they are fun, and it's not like they're any worse than like a fair game or something like that. But this is definitely a trend that we see a lot of, and the kids love it. And don't get me wrong, it's fun for us too. And I can even see how addictive it gets almost as you like hit like a jackpot on a game. But it's definitely a lot more of those ticket-based, child gambling type games almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it probably wasn't our favorite part of the arcade. It was probably Chloe's. But they did have an air hockey table, which I know that we've all played air hockey at some point, but it was really cool. It made these little like dinging ice noises, basically like a hockey rink.
It sounds so cheesy, but that extra level, like ping, 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 as it bounced around and makes that noise, it literally sounded and looked kind of like you were playing on ice. And yeah, super cheesy, but that little extra level is part of like what we're talking about with some of these games, really, and what differentiates them. The basketball games and some of these games are very similar to the classics they had, but they have more points to them, more like ideas behind them. Like when you're playing Connect 4 with basketballs, that's a whole different level of game than what you used to play when you were just trying to beat the other person and how fast you could shoot them.
Oh, absolutely. They also had we mentioned it earlier, the King Kong VR game. That was very cool, and we looked extremely silly batting at the air, which I'm sure we will go ahead and put in some of that video so that you can make fun of us. That was a lot of fun. There was a really unique game there where you're shooting targets, but you're shooting a screen and it's with real water. And you can actually feel the mist kicking back onto you. I don't think I've ever seen one in another arcade. I'm sure they're out there, but that definitely was something we all had to try.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. It was like you're just fighting zombies, but there's actually like power-ups, so the squirt gun would actually get like higher spray, like more powerful, and you're sitting there like many of the games where you'd squirt it with a gun, but it's real water coming out, and essentially you're squirting at a screen and whatever contraption they have up there to mark it. It's definitely interesting. You'd feel this light mist at you coming at you especially when you like have the power up on the weapon. That was definitely one of the weirder games I've ever seen, and I don't think I've ever seen that one. And along with the uniqueness of that one, they had that weird twister game, like a twister like on the wall and on the ceilings, like as an actual game. That was kind of an interesting one.
And we definitely learned we're not nearly as coordinated or flexible as we were as children. But no, it was a really good time. And like I said, it's probably not my favorite arcade I've ever been to, but definitely worth the trip. Especially if you're planning on going to a movie already. Absolutely pop in there. Or if you're older and you want to try the axe throwing, which Shay is going to talk to you about, then you have the arcade there for any kids under 16 to go ahead and run around and play while you're doing that.
Yeah, definitely. So the fact that it's already a movie theater, you've got a restaurant, a full bar, and then you've got that arcade, and then the axe throwing. Now, I've been to axe throwing before, and axe throwing is always fun. I'm not amazing at it, but I always have a good time. But what makes this one unique is not only is it axe throwing, but it's got this like laser digital projection on the axe board itself. And so when you go to throw the axe, you can play different games. So we were playing like just 1 to 300 where there's different circles and you hit them, and then you do stuff to go mark it yourself, almost like bowling. You hit the touch screen and it adds up the points and then moves on to the next player. But it's really cool to have just something different than just like your classic like one bullseye. If you had some really major skill levels, this would definitely differentiate some people because you could get really good at this and really specifically target the numbers. I think there was like tic-tac-toe. There was just like 15 different games.
Yeah, there was a lot of
We didn't have time to try them all, that's for sure, but we'll definitely go back to try some more. So that was definitely a really cool part of it. It modernizes it, and it was very safe there. They had 4 lanes set up with cages around them. Only one person can go on the lane at a time. And they, did have some fairly strict rules, and make you go over some, like a disclaimer and everything, but you are throwing axes. So you do probably want to make sure you're following their safety guidelines and make sure you're doing exactly what they say. You don't want to get kicked out of that place or anything like that. But it definitely makes it like a cool hangout place. You could eat and have a couple drinks. As long as you're not getting too tipsy, then the axe throwing should be a lot of fun. Like I said, you could watch a movie there, so theoretically, you could pretty much spend all day at this place. It's the kind of place I would have no problem spending an afternoon, maybe eat lunch and hang out at the arcade and then catch an evening movie and stuff. I think that's something that is definitely in our future as they open up. So that's something that before they had a couple arcade games, and every time I walked out of there, somebody still wanted to play an arcade game or two. As a matter of fact, they had Ninja Turtles, that 4-player arcade cabinet,
Yep,
and that made its way over to Smitty's. So we were playing that in the arcade, of course, there as well.
And I would just say for anybody that's apprehensive about trying out the axe throwing, because that's a fairly new trend the last couple of years of people trying, if you're nervous, definitely try it at Schmitty's. They have the nicest staff there. He walked us through the system. He tried to give us some tips on how to throw the axe a little better. I'm not going to lie, I probably didn't improve much, but he certainly tried his best to help. So definitely take a look at that. Now, the other thing about Smitty's is in some places, Smitty's has actually even more to offer. So if you're looking at adding the bowling element to, already the arcade, the axe throwing, the movie theater, go ahead and check out their Sanford location as well.
Yeah, definitely Smitty's is an awesome place to check out. We did go to axe throwing somewhere else, and the only thing I would say that maybe they had over Smitty's, because I really like this digital thing, is they had a few different kinds of axes to throw. And then, of course, at the end, we didn't even try this, but they're like, hey, do you want to try this $30 box of other random objects?
Ninja throwing stars.
Ninja throwing stars and
And
throwing
knives.
knives and stuff. That would have been pretty cool, but it's also kind of gimmicky, so I don't think we missed a whole lot there. So I think if you really are going to want to take axe throwing and take it seriously, the fact that they have the nice big 2-handed one to throw over your head, and then the hatchet is still going to take care of, really any of the axes that you're going to want to worry about. So you're not going to have a major problem there.
Now, outside of Smitty's, about 20 miles from there, inside of the Portland Mall, is another large arcade. Larger than Smitty's, actually. Now, I wouldn't say quite Dave and Buster size, but they're pretty dang big. They're called Round One Bowling and Amusement. So they have a huge arcade, and then they also have the bowling element there as well, including, of course, full bar, restaurant. This particular arcade is a little more unique than some of the others we've seen because a lot of it is games from Japan and a lot of rhythm games, which we're not used to seeing, at least not as many of them. It is really interesting. They do, however, of course, have the same, as we were mentioning, the child gambling ticket games and the, 5 million tickets you win a Squishmallow. They do have all of those things there as well. And it is we've been there a million times. Our son absolutely loves it there. The girls like it too, but it's definitely one of those places you want to check out.
Yeah, it's got a good range of fighter games and like she was saying, the ticket games. There's still some cool things like the Big Pac-Man and those kind of games. But then, the unique rhythm games and stuff, a lot of them, to be honest, you don't even know what you're doing because unless you know Japanese, they're actually written in Japanese and stuff. So there's a couple Guitar Hero type games and some rhythm games and some singing games, some dancing games, some stuff like that are not my element at all. However, there are some other weird games that are just worth playing, even if you don't know what they are. So one of my favorites is one of my favorites is this game where essentially you flip over a table, and the object is, as far as we can tell, to cause the biggest mess you can. So it's all about timing and how hard you flip over the table. So I did try it 2 different times, and on my second attempt, I got first place. So, if I ever do want to go pro on the table flipping circuit, then that's certainly something for me. But it's a very weird game. I mean, you literally flip a physical table, and it's all part of the arcade cabinet as somebody comes to serve you food, and then everything just goes flying. It's absolutely insane. It makes almost no sense. You don't really know how you're scoring, but in the end, you can tell that you got like first or third or fifth or whatever. But it's one of those games that's just worth trying. I don't think I've ever seen something like that one anywhere else. Like, it's definitely unique like that. And even some of the fighting games are like very close to what we have here, but a couple of them are like a Japanese version of it, so they might have a few different things that some other people have. There's so much there that I probably underappreciate that somebody like my son or somebody who's like maybe a little bit more into some of the rhythm games and stuff would really appreciate, but I still have a fun time when I'm
So
there.
at the Portland arcade, the other thing is they do have like a small little sit-in restaurant. It's just basic pub food for the most part, which means, safely your kids will probably eat their hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken fingers. We will say that you will get nickel and dimed a little bit.
So we got chicken fingers and everything was fine, but we just wanted some barbecue sauce. They literally made us pay extra for a container of barbecue sauce to go with chicken fingers. So, like the place is great, but there's some things like that always make you not absolutely love a place. So it's little things. I'm not trying to be a Karen, but it's the kind of thing that you definitely don't enjoy, and it's not maybe feeling like the best customer service, but everybody needs to make their money. I'm not trying to judge them. It's just a very weird way of doing business. Everything else about the place is great, though. Now, do we mention the food at Smitty's? I don't know if we did.
Just there's a full bar and restaurant.
Okay.
Because it's a movie theater.
Oh, yeah. Insert this real quick back into Smitty's. This is like off. But so unlike a lot of places, like the one in Portland, they have a smaller menu and everything. Smitty's has a fairly large menu. I don't want to call it an absolutely like full restaurant menu, but it's a really large menu. They have burgers, they got tips, they got nachos, they got all kinds of stuff like that. So they are one of the more like full menus, especially where it's one of those sit down and eat places.
I wouldn't say Schmitty's is the cheapest for eating. It's definitely not the most expensive, but I will say you're definitely paying a little bit more for the themed meals. They were fun. We went there for Jurassic Park, the most recent one, and ordered a Jurassic burger. It's like a little more expensive, but it was cute nonetheless.
I'm not going to eat the group burger, but hey, if you like vegetarian menu, they have the group burger, and I've eaten the Captain America Thor burgers, and they did something for Top Gun. I can't remember. I think it was like a chicken sandwich.
They have Harry Potter mozzarella ones and Peter Pan's pizza.
If we compare that Smitty's menu, like we talked about earlier, to the Portland menu, not only are the fact that the not only the fact that the oh no. Not only is the fact that the dipping sauce cost extra. Oh no! You guys probably hear our dog barking now, don't you?
Sorry, fur babies are just as loud as the real babies.
Yeah. So this is the trouble with trying to record in a spare room and make it into a studio, but as the food goes in the Portland one, it's still decent. Charging you a little extra for a cup of barbecue sauce is no fun, and it's just a basic menu, but it definitely doesn't compare to somewhere like Smitty's or even really Dave & Buster's. Now, even though we've had a lot of fun at Dave & Buster's, I will argue that even though I consider it the candle to hold all the other ones too, I think my new favorite arcade is Fun Spot. This is one that was right on our nose this whole time, and we just discovered, even though it's been there for quite a while. Okay, so Fun Spot is this really, really interesting arcade where it's actually the largest arcade in the world. Okay, I don't know how this is right there, right next to us, but they have over, 600 games, I think? And not just that, but it's 3 floors. They've got almost half of those games are like old games, including Flower, which is like one of 2 in existence that works. A huge bank of pinball games, that upstairs arcade area is like arcade museum, and so they've got a ton of just old school arcades up there, arcade games. Then downstairs, of course, they've got a lot of the ticket-based games. Maybe not as many as some of the other arcades, but still plenty of ticket-based games. Skee ball for tickets. They've got like slot machines for tickets. They've got a lot of the skill type, hit the buzzer at the right time type games, and then just a ton of other regular arcade games like you would see, in the 80s, 90s, some of the shooting games like the Terminator ones and some of those. But not just that, they also have a full bowling alley. They also have a full indoor mini golf course, which isn't huge, but I mean, it's a full indoor mini golf course. Like, it's 18 holes. And that's inside of there. And then across the street, they have, they have and across the street, they have go karts, which is pretty insane. Mm-hmm. And then right next door, they have a cash bingo hall. So, I mean, this place is massive. Like, we're talking 3 floors plus an extra building, gigantic, like, parking lots all over the place. And then across the street being the go karts, like, this place is nuts. Inside of that, also, they've got a bar inside. Mm-hmm. And then not just like the bar, but it's like a bar / tavern. They also have a pizza place at the other end.
Yes, they do.
So they've got that there as well. And it's all decorated with like a lot of the older stuff, which is really cool. So it's a little creepy, as you can see this head that was above us while we were eating. But that's like, it's the old stuff, and it has a lot of the history. Back in, early 1952, 1960s, all these places were like in New England were like little mini theme parks, not Disney or anything, but they had all kinds of other stuff. So like you hear about some of them still, like Storyland we've been to in Santa's Village. This Fun Spot was essentially one of those, and they had like a outdoorsy themed theme park and some stuff like that. And this guy that's ran this place has just kept it going since then. It's really amazing, and it's a lot of fun. So we've been there quite a few times, and definitely like to make the trip back there whenever we can.
Most definitely. We've been there a couple of times now, and as we mentioned, this arcade's been there a long time. So it opened back in 1952. And it was actually originally at a different location because the owner at the time, Bob Lawton, who actually is rumored to still work there every single day because he loves it there that much. He had opened it at a different location because he didn't have the capital back then to make it what it is now. But eventually it was moved into this current building that it's in, and I'd say they probably could even expand it more if they really wanted to. The great thing about here is that it's open almost every single day of the year. Excluding Christmas and Thanksgiving, they are open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. So there's no rushing when you get off work to get down there and hope that you'll get there by 5 o'clock when they close. It's open pretty late, so that's nice. The other thing I really enjoy about it, and I know this isn't a big deal to some people, but for nostalgic purposes, most arcades have now moved to the digital slide cards for tickets, tokens, and for me, it's kind of like when you have a credit card. If you can't see what your balance is regularly in your hand, you're probably going to burn right through those tickets, right through those credits. At Fun Spot, they still use the classic tokens, and it's actually very budget friendly as well. And I just love being able to divide up the coins between the kids. Everybody has their own cup and can take it. It's easier to kind of keep track of what you're spending.
It's probably part of the nostalgia in this as well, is we just love pumping those coins in the machines. It's just more fun that way. And in all honesty, most of them aren't like the expensive 5 or 6 tokens like you get at some of these other places. There's a couple, don't get me wrong, there's a handful of ones that are more than 1 token, but as far as like the classic arcades, they're all like 1 token. And typically there's a deal going on in the machine that as long as you put the 20 in, you get a few extra tokens more than if you nickel, if you put $1 in at a time. And so it's a pretty fair arcade. And there's also the tickets. So it's kind of weird because the convenience of the digital card with keeping track of your tickets is so nice. You only carry that card around, you got your balance on it, keeps all your points and everything, you don't have to worry about it. So you don't have to worry about losing things, losing tokens, dropping entire cups of tokens. However, you lose the card, you lose everything. And then on top of that, the tickets, there's just something about that. I feel like that's almost part of the whole like mini gambling, kids gambling thing is watching you win 1,000 tokens and watching it spit out of the machine. And of course, this does create a couple issues with maintenance. So it does seem like Fun Spot does have a few things that go down here and there, but they've been pretty good as far as I can tell about getting somebody there to fix it. I've only had a handful of times where like I lost a coin or something like that. And typically they're not going to let that happen a long time. There's a few machines that were down just about every time, but almost always something was being worked on, and if it was down one time, it'd be up another time.
Right.
So some machines are probably just problematic. One thing I will say is I don't think I saw any of the pinball machines except for maybe the old Hercules one, which is just so like old. By the way, the Hercules one is like this gigantic pinball machine, but it's just kind of like it feels kind of weak too. But
Literally, you may not be able to use it if your arms are not long enough.
giant.
I struggle.
But most of them are in really good shape. They seem like everything's working on them and stuff like that. If anything, there's maybe a couple where they're so old that the screens are starting to get just like kind of worn in here and there. But I mean, pretty darn good shape considering some of this stuff is like really, really old and some of it I've never seen before.